EMP, electromagnetic pulse. You hear a lot about it, especially in our current global situation, the possibility that if a nuclear device is detonated high atmosphere, it could generate one, and depending upon where you are in relation to that detonation, could affect all of the electronics and the electricity grid all around you. This is Urban Sentinel. Let's get into it. So you've got a plan, which is always a good thing, and one of those plans is to be able to survive in an SHTF situation, one of them being possibly an EMP, which would cause, depending upon the scale, a nationwide blackout or region-wide blackout, which could still lead to a series of cascading failures along our power grid. Because as we know from just even a few years ago, Texas lost almost all of its entire power grid, and it was down for several days. Now, if you could imagine an EMP occurring somewhere over Kansas that affects the central grid area, causing a failure towards the eastern and then the Texas and the western grid area, everything could collapse and be completely shut down within just a few minutes that may take weeks to months or even years to get everything back up and running. Now, I'm just going to go real quickly over the primary difference between an EMP and a lightning strike, because there are similarities based upon the laws of physics and how energy is generated and dispersed throughout certain systems, but there is a key difference in how those two will affect you. Now, real quick, yes, I know you're in awe of the high-end graphics. Your power plant sends energy through a substation, which sends it down the line to the pole outside your house, which passes through a small transformer here and then goes into your house where you've got your circuit breaker on the inside. Lightning might travel from one cloud to another cloud and then strike anywhere it pleases. With that being said, the energy from a lightning strike might hit your house. If your house is properly grounded, it will travel down through the grounding wire into the ground and you're good to go. Your circuits at your circuit breaker may also trip if the lightning has struck the wire, because it'll travel towards your house and towards the pole. This small transformer looks like a garbage can. That has a large fuse on it that blows, preventing that energy from traveling anywhere else on the line to other poles and affecting every place else. Same thing where if it hits a line near a substation or if it hits over near the power plant. Each individual point, like a surge protector that you might have plugged into your wall and then you have your TV and everything else plugged into that, stops that surge of electricity from traveling any further, damaging devices. Now, the reason why a surge protector can work is because the energy in the form of lightning starts at one specific point and can only travel along the conductive surface. So if it hits in the middle of a power line between your house and the pole, it can only go up or down the line. So it goes back towards the pole and towards your house. If both are properly put together, a fuse blows on the pole, your circuits trip on your house. The only thing that's effectively damaged are the birds that were on the power line in between. Now, in the case of an EMP from a nuclear detonation, let's say up there, 200 miles up above Kansas City, a 1 megaton nuke goes off and it sends out an EMP that, in the mathematical ratio, 200 miles up is equal to about 2,000 miles in diameter on the ground where it hits. That energy that comes down, it's going through all the clouds, it's hitting the wires, it's hitting the power plant, it's hitting the house, it's hitting your cell phone, it's hitting your DVD player, it's hitting your car, it's hitting everything, everywhere, all at once. So in that situation, your surge protector that's on your house for your electronics won't make a difference, because not only is the energy hitting the power line leading to your house, it's hitting all the wires in your house, it's hitting the surge protector itself, and it's hitting all of the electronic devices plugged in to the surge protector and everything inside them. It's frying everything. Now, yes, to one degree or another, depending upon the type of electrical components, some will be literally completely fried, because there are small components that take microamps worth of power to do their job, and you hit them with too much energy, they blow. There are other components that can take a higher level of energy, but they still require a certain level of regulation. Certain devices have energy that it's stepped down, then it passes through, and then it's stepped back up again. So depending upon what the components are, determines how well they're going to function. Now, you often hear the experts, which are pay grades above me, saying that most cars will still function after an EMP, and that is true. But anyone who owns or has driven a 2000 or newer vehicle, when you have one thing go wrong, oftentimes those newer vehicles are designed with multiple computer processors, each one designated to control specific functions or sub-functions throughout the entire car. If you know what limp mode is, if you know what the reduced driving capabilities on certain systems are, that's when the computer is functioning properly and it says, hey, we have a sensor alert on this component. We will reduce the speed or we'll change the operating performance of the vehicle. So now just imagine you get into your vehicle, it starts up. You know that that was an EMP that went off just a few hours ago. You've got your bug out plan to get from your point A to your point B. You start driving. Your foot is to the floor, but you're crawling along at barely 20 miles an hour because some of the components within your vehicle have shut off. They've either been destroyed or they've been incapacitated where they're not sending or receiving the proper signals from the other components. So your car may run, but it's running in limp mode. Or you may have another situation where the processor, let's say, that controls the fuel injection, throttle, and the transfer of power through the transmission, let's say that's off. Suddenly your Toyota Camry is getting 2 miles per gallon and you're chugging through your entire tank before you've even cleared your state line. Again, your vehicle is running, but it's not running properly. And in a situation where you need to escape, just on a hypothetical, you live within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant and you know that their power systems are down, there's a greater chance that their system could go critical because they can't get the water to pump in and circulate through the reactor to cool the rods. Exactly. So now that we've gotten that SHTF Hollywood scenario out of the way, let me just show you a few simple, quick, easy things you can do to make Faraday cages to keep some of your electronic devices safe. And I know you're thinking, especially in certain situations, well, what would be the point if the cell towers aren't working and you can't get a cell signal? True. But if your cell phone isn't damaged electronically and you can still power it up and keep it powered, you can keep maps, you can keep photographs of areas, you can keep lists of things where, yes, having paper copies is good, and you can make multiple paper copies and put them in those sleeve protectors and put them in folders and have hard copies on standby for certain things. But that can also become cumbersome to one extent, always having to carry around a small little bug out booklet with you depending upon what you have in there. Whereas if you can keep a cell phone or a tablet isolated and safe from an EMP, and bring all that stuff up, because in a total grid down situation, somewhere between, I'm saying, day 7 and day 21, things at that point are going to be across the board bad for everybody. And the only way that you may end up surviving is you need to know if you have to go out and scavenge for medical supplies, or you have to get certain pieces of equipment, things like that. If you have all the information on how to keep your place up and running, how to tend to any type of illness or injury, or how to make or repair things, having a working, functioning tablet or cell phone that has some video stored on it, that has documents stored on it, things like that, will make it a lot easier for you. Always good to have hard copies, always good to have a book, have a magazine, have those articles cut out. But again, you're trying to make your life, even in a post-apocalyptic situation, as easy as you possibly can, because there's no point in having a struggle within the struggle that is the apocalypse. All right, plastic, glass, paper, cardboard, or any other type of paper product, they are good insulators. They do not conduct electrical energy. Metals, aluminum, steel, all that sort of thing, they're conductors. They will send energy sailing and careening through happy as can be. A Faraday cage, basically in simplistic terms, is a metal conductor on the outside, but the items inside are insulated from that energy. Now, yes, the energy will travel around the outside of whatever metal object it's attached to or contacts, but when there's a way in, energy, just like water, will find a way. So you want to make sure that the items you have on the inside are insulated so they don't come in direct contact with the metal, especially if there's a chance that that energy, like putting a aluminum foil piece into a microwave, all that energy starts bouncing around, ricocheting everywhere, and that's what causes the problem. So you can have a device, put it inside a paper bag, cardboard box, glass jar, you know, Glad plastic bag, whatever you want. As long as you can keep it insulated and protected from the metal, that by itself will help you keep that electronic device functioning. Now, just to give you an example, this is my deep fry pot for my turkeys. I have another pot very similar. It's in a different location. You could use a pot like this, stainless steel. You can take whatever electronic items you have, put them into a shoebox, tape up the shoebox, because again, these are items that you're going to keep for just in case. You're not going to have them out on your shelf, out on your desk, because you may not be home, or specifically speaking, if an EMP through a nuclear device from someone attacking us happens, we're not going to get a heads up. So you're not going to have time to grab everything and package it all up. So it should already be in the container. Now, as you can clearly see, you know, the lid, it does not screw on. There are no clamps for it, and it's not even perfectly evenly sealed. I'm not worried about that because you'd use aluminum tape, put it around the rim, and it does two things. One, it closes this up, making it a better sealed structure. And then two, in the event that something tips over, it's not going to fly off and drop out and expose the items on the inside. This is an insulated aluminum packing wrapper that laptop battery came in. Sealed up, one end here. You could easily take some small electronic items, place them into a plastic Ziploc bag or even a thin paper bag, slide it on the inside, tape it up again using the aluminum tape, close it up, nice and easy, and then you can tuck it away somewhere. Metal toolbox. Again, same principle. It's not perfectly sealed, so again, you want to be able to close it up, seal it up, but having something that's durable enough, you can put those sensitive items in, close it up, and keep it out of the way. And also too, when you really think about it, this sitting on a shelf in a shop someplace or down in the basement tucked underneath the stairs is not going to draw attention. Should your location be compromised, this won't immediately be something that someone's going to see right off the top. Now granted, if someone's looking for tools and they see a toolbox, you know, you can do the math on that one. They're going to go and grab a toolbox. But just to keep things safe, and the advantage too is you have a handle, this way you can transport it if you needed to. Even something like this antique metal cabinet, which I found on the side of the road. Now, right now it's just storing junk, nothing in particular, but something like this, I think you could actually take the spray sealant, so like a rubberized spray can seal all or flex seal, line the inside of a container like that with it. Now granted, that's a large container. I mean, you'd have to have a lot of electronics that you want to keep safe in there. You wouldn't need something that big, but you know, something like that is entirely up to you. And even if you wanted to do a simple arts and crafts project, you take a Ziploc bag type of thing, you take the aluminum foil tape, and you cover the outside of the bag all the way up, all the way around. You can put whatever small electronic component you have inside, then seal it up, and then use the last little bit of tape to make a flap over the top to close everything up. It's good enough. It's waterproof. It'll protect it from the EMP. I mean, granted, you don't want to drop it. You don't want things crushing it because it's still just plastic, but it will provide a level of protection that is far above simply being in your pocket or sitting on the desk drawer. So those are the primary things that you can do to make quick, expedient Faraday cages. I mean, even using the metal garbage cans, the aluminum cans, you could take something like that, close the lid up, you've got inside whatever the devices are insulated. Again, paper, plastic, glass, styrofoam, things like that. Put them inside there, that'll help protect it. Easiest thing to do is just keep it simple. That's all. It doesn't have to be overly complex. You can keep it simple. It doesn't require making dedicated space in your house. You can usually do something depending upon your level of ingenuity and ability. You can have it integrated right into things within your house, you know, in a drawer or a cabinet, on a shelf, wherever it is. This way, those devices you've got set up, your handheld radios, your tablets, your cell phone, your battery chargers, your hand crank chargers, your solar chargers, because all those things have circuits and components in them that if one of them goes bad, the whole thing's useless. And that's what people tend to forget, is with our modern electronics, it only takes one small thing to go wrong and everything shuts down. And at that point, it becomes completely useless. And if you need certain things, if you have medical devices that have sensitive components on them, if you've got power chargers and power generators that you want to be able to utilize for those devices, then you need to make sure that you have a way to keep them safe. And always, if possible, remove any batteries in there, because what you don't want is having a battery in the device, giving it a small load, because what will happen is if an EMP does make contact, it's going to amp that power up and send it through with the rest of the energy, blowing all the little components that are within it. And then when you go to use it, it's no good. So you want to pull batteries out, so this way there's less chance of it retaining a charge. Yes, some devices have small capacitors and even small micro batteries in them that you're not going to be able to disable unless you really know what you're doing with electronics. And it almost defeats the purpose in doing it down to that level, because then when you do need those devices in an emergency, you're now going to have to spend the time reassembling all those little things. It's just simply easier. Keep your emergency flashlights with no batteries in them, especially if you have the newer LED lights with the multi-lens and the multi-illumination optics, things like that. Pull the batteries out, put it next to it, duct tape, whatever you want, so this way you can grab the flashlight, rip off the tape, put the batteries in, you're good to go. Same thing with your radios. Separate them from the battery compartments, but keep them close by. All of your chargers, wrap them up in just a little bit of foam or paper, keep them in there, all nice and safe, so you don't have a chance of metal contacting metal and have anything go wrong. So these are just some things to think about, especially in the current climate where, the potential and the possibility of a nuclear detonation, granted, if it's not above us and it's on the ground and it's far away, not going to affect us. An EMP from a nuclear device is specifically something that has to be done at a higher altitude. Again, I forget the exact ratio, but effectively for, every 100 miles up, you get 1,000 miles out. And so as an example, 200 miles up above Kansas City, Kansas is roughly 2,000 miles around in diameter. And when you look on a map, you can see a large portion of the continental United States, as well as parts of Canada and Mexico, fall within that. Now, not every system is going to be shut down. There are plenty of military and government facilities that have special backup systems and alternate energy systems that can handle an EMP. There are lots of cases where you could have a Tesla parked in an underground parking garage, and after an EMP goes off, go downstairs, get into your Tesla, and drive off and have no problems. As long as you have a way to charge your vehicle up afterwards, you'll be good to go. But most people, most devices, especially the larger level devices that are out and exposed, such as the power lines, the pole transformers, the substations, all of those things are going to be shot. And that's where the destruction really comes from. Without that power going through the system, without a way to properly generate and regulate and distribute all of that energy, everything else falls apart. So even if your devices in your house are working, you don't have power coming in and you only have your backup system that'll last you a couple of days, you're going to be SOL just as well as everyone else. And like I said, 7 days, 21 days, no power anywhere, you're going to have some problems. But again, this is all part of the planning, it's all part of the process. All right, Urban Sentinel, I'll catch you in the next one.